Hearty shalom to you. Jeffrey Seif here, looking at some facts about Acts. And in the 17th chapter, we're reminded of the fact that our hero was on the move. Faith is on the move, by the way, that advancing, growing, expanding, looking to advance into other people's lives, heads, and hearts. In the 17th chapter, we encounter Paul and his entourage. They're on a journey. We're told in verse 1, they pass through Amphipolis and Apollonia, and they come to Thessalonica, where there was a Jewish synagogue. And Paul, the apostle, frequents synagogues, not just simply as a missionary strategy. People say, well, you know, Paul dumped all that Jewish stuff. It's all about being a Christian now, and so he's just weaseling his way into their world to have an opportunity to talk about Christ, to pull them out. Well, I grant that Paul is looking to advance the kingdom, and he, like all people, are allowed to articulate if something good has happened to them in life. If you had something really good, if you won the lottery, you'd probably tell all your friends. And if you got a great deal on a car, you heard, my goodness, there's a dealership that's going out of business and they're giving it away on dimes on a dollar. You tell everyone. I mean, people can talk about experiences that they adjudge to be positive, and certainly Paul does that, but he's not being disingenuous. It's not just a missionary strategy. The reason why I mention that, it says, as his custom was. In verse 2, Paul went in. That is to say, he himself was accustomed to participating in the fabric of Jewish social life, which included Sabbath worship, and he himself lived within the parameters of a Jewish lifestyle. He didn't jettison all that to become something else. Now, something was added to his lifestyle, to be sure, that was very transformative. That is, he had an experience with Jesus, but he's not walking around telling Jews to chuck the Jewish story. No, he goes as his manner, as his custom was, into the synagogue, and there we're told that he debates from the scriptures. He reasons for a variety of Sabbaths with them. He opens the scriptures and gives evidence that Jesus is the Messiah. Paul himself was a member of the Parushim, a Pharisee, and when he would come into town, people would note, here is a noteworthy scholar, someone who has the equivalent of a PhD from Hebrew University, Jerusalem. Well, let's, have him share, and, he has some wisdom. He's a guest speaker. And then Paul talks, and they realize, well, it's a little different than what we were expecting. And, he winds up getting in trouble oftentimes. But when you look at his biographer, Luke, he tells us that synagogue leaders followed him, various leaders in the synagogue. He told us earlier in Acts that a great many of the priests become obedient to the faith. Levites, Pharisees, similarly, the New Testament tells us there were believers among them. Paul certainly being one, to be sure. Well, he's a scholar. He opens up the scriptures, we're told in verse 3, and gave evidence that the Messiah had to suffer and rise, saying, this Yeshua, whom I declare to you, is the Messiah. Here's a man who's speaking from a Jewish world. He's working within the parameters of a Jewish tradition. He's in a synagogue. He's looking at the Hebrew Bible, and he's pointing to Jesus, giving an individual an opportunity to hear about the Jewish Messiah in a context that accords with their senses and sensibilities. That's not what Jews have had for millennia, I should say. Sadly, the church kind of evolved away from its Jewish roots. Even though Jesus was a Jew and the disciples were all Jewish, it became really, in the mind's eye of the Jews and in the church and in the world, for that matter, a non-Jewish story. Well, that's the Christian story, and Christians are over here and the Jews are over there. They're in different orbits. That is, a convenient perspective with a great chasm between the two, but it's not borne out by a casual assessment of the primary source documents. If you look in the New Testament itself, the whole Jewish story and Jesus story, it's all intertwined. And here Paul is speaking from the Jewish world about the Jewish Messiah to the Jewish people. And what the witness of the church has been for so long is you people need to convert and accept this, and you're blind and you don't understand and you're ruined and you're this and you're that. It's kind of you people are here and we're people here and you need to leave there and become us. Well, that's really not what I'm looking at in the literature. And that's not really even the point that I want to make. It's an introduction to it. It's somewhat parenthetical to it, however, and here's why. The whole notion of presenting the Jesus story from the Jewish Bible is something that is so true to the heart of what we're trying to do. When I say we, I don't just mean the Bible Society, the executives, and the small few that are on the payroll of it. When I say we, I'm thinking of all of the translators and the 70 or so individuals that participated in the manufacture of the Tree of Life version of the Bible. I'm thinking as well about the publishers. It went through various reams, actually, various presses. Destiny Image was on the front end. We're so thankful for that. Baker Books, similarly. Major distributors of Christian materials wanted to, with us, help Jewish people come to see Jesus and help Jesus people come to see Jews. We have our own imprint, by the way, and people contract with us to present the Tree of Life version in different venues. But I just want to make the point here when we're looking at this. Paul wants to connect the dots between the Older Testament scripture and the Jesus story. And that is so true to the heart of this literature. And I should say as well that my own responsibility with the text, finally, a few nights ago I had dinner. My wife Barry and I had Jeff and Pat Feinberg over. Professor Feinberg was the project manager for the New Covenant Scriptures. He and his wife are both professors, and my wife and myself were both professors too. So we had a nice professorial time together. Jeff Feinberg superintended the New Covenant. I was vested with responsibility to be the project manager for the Older Covenant, plus to stitch it all together and kind of develop the process and make sure all the gears worked properly and oil them when they didn't, and replace a few cogs when they needed replaced. I did all that. But while it was a community endeavor, when the translation was tendered, it was my task to do the cross-references. This is a referenced Bible, the big thick one, where people can look at the subtext and it points from the Older Covenant to the New and from the Newer Covenant to the Old, and we work our way around. And it was my job, and it wasn't a job for a day, to vet and approve all the references. And so with whatever else this rendition of the literature has, intrinsic to it is a kind of connectivity between the testaments. Inasmuch as Paul here is endeavoring to connect the dots, that certainly is true to the Tree of Life Bible Society, and it certainly is true of me, the fellow that's now reading the book, and seeing Paul doing in his way, in his day, what I similarly endeavor to do in mine, though I'm no Paul, to be sure. In verse 4, we're told that some were convinced and became attached to Paul and Silas. You get out there and you bring forth the word, and you do get some response. We're told a large number of God-fearing Greeks and no small number of the leading women. Seems that Paul's out there in the world and he's attracting women with means and strength, and leading women. He's similarly attracting men of non-Jewish extract as well as Jews, and this will become the nucleus of these congregations that are Jewish-friendly churches that are made up of Jews and Gentiles together worshiping Israel's Messiah, having become convinced through Paul's tendering and explanation through the Older Testament. Well, thank you for affording me the opportunity to tender an explanation. It's not the Old Testament in this juncture. We're going through the New. We're looking at some facts about Acts. Let's do it again in a week. How about that? Jeffrey Seif, signing out.